It's impossible to overstate just how excited I was to finally get my hands on UFO 50, a title which has had an almost mythical quality in conversations over the years. The next thing from the creators of Spelunky, quietly known to some but never really all that visible during development, a phantom of an idea built of lofty ambitions and with the keen eyes of a group of developers responsible for some of the most electrifying indie games of recent years. And it's here! And it's really bloody good. A game I found myself thinking about constantly since I started playing. It's fun and diverse and has layers to it that no doubt I'll be chipping away at for years to come. But the thing is, while that shroud of mystery has been lifted somewhat, for me there is still a question left unanswered about UFO 50. Perhaps its greatest dilemma. How the hell do you actually go about playing the damn thing? With 50 games on offer right from the start, each one with hidden depths to be plundered, there are a wealth of options available to all types of players. Those who want to dip a toe in everything, those who are happy taking each title in sequence, those who make a beeline for 2 or 3 specific titles and never play anything else. The game itself offers up a variety of ways to organise this collection, by chronology, by time played, by favourites, divided into quick play and epic play in order to denote which ones require more of a commitment than others. Crucially, nothing is gatekept. Nothing is built along a path of progress. There is no sequence, only a timeline. There is no guiding hand, only a shop window of delights. There is no right way to play this game, but I think there is a wrong way. And this is what I want to talk about in this video. In order to explain myself, I need to take a brief tangent to talk about the process of writing about games. Something I've always fancied pursuing as a games writer, but have yet to have the opportunity to do, is review under deadline. To be assigned a particular game and a particular window in which to play, ruminate, write and submit. I'm not naive about this process. I know it's not a glamorous job. I'm sure if I had to do it for a living, my enthusiasm for the craft would wane. But from the outside, I find the tension of such things really fascinating. No stranger to the constraints of time, I already set myself deadlines for the work I publish online. When I'm focused and really on it, I know I can commit a couple of thousand words on a subject in a short space, and even sometimes have those words be coherent and worth reading. But there's an element of the review process that I have never really engaged with. Writing under deadline is one thing, but playing under deadline is something I struggle to get my head around, because that's not how I play games, and that's not how I think games should be played. The times when I've put myself in a position to do so, I found the experience diminished by it. It's a bit of a death march. Like scarfing down your lunch because you have to get back to more pressing matters. Fleeting joys and lingering indigestion. No time to stop and smell the flowers. No time to bathe in the waters of artistry. And I think to a certain degree it does have an impact on a writer's impression of that particular work. I appreciate that this is a circumstance completely out of the hands of reviewers. A sensible publisher is one who will deliver code weeks in advance in order to give that gestational period with the game prior to an embargo lifting. I know many do not. I know that due to both the strictness of deadlines in print media and the hyper-competitive nature of the online space, especially in regard to the big important games, there is a matter of urgency here. Not to mention a moral responsibility to one's audience to let them know what they are getting into should they choose to purchase prior to a game's release. It is here that I have to praise a lot of the reviews of games I do read, because in spite of all these constraints, a remarkable amount of thought and nuance goes into these things, often echoing my own sentiments on titles I've been privileged enough to unfurl slowly over time. I don't doubt for a second that when pen is put to paper, what results is an authentic attribution of that person's emotional response to the work at hand. But the thing about art is that one's impression of it does evolve over time. And with distance. Once the shock and awe wears off, there is a kernel of truth in your feelings towards a specific offering, and there are aspects of it that stay with you that might not necessarily be the ones that impressed or disappointed you when you first engaged. With a game like UFO 50, I feel like this is a critical element of not only getting the most out of the experience, but also understanding it on a fundamental level. Through the context of its creators' collective previous bodies of work, we know that the games in this collection have depth, have intent, and secrets that will blossom out the more time and effort you put into them. I would strongly argue that to properly honour this work, it requires us to take a step back. I don't think this is a simple case of hours put in either, or even hitting more tangible milestones like achieving gold cartridge or cherry on each of the titles in the collection. One could easily lose dozens if not hundreds of hours to UFO 50 even in such a small window since its launch, but because time itself is not a fixed, tangible entity, this doesn't necessarily mean that any of us has the full picture already. This is because there is a strong distinction between time as volume and time as distance. However many dozens of hours put into a game changes your impression of it depending on where and when those hours were placed. You cannot simply count the minutes on the clock. I've spent at least 3 times as long thinking about UFO 50 as I have playing it, and I consider every second of that as me engaging with the experience. Most games, if not all of them, benefit from being revisited critically sometime down the line, and that reappraisal process is an art unto itself. As players, we have a luxury ill-afforded to critics in this regard, and I should clarify, this is not to say that your initial impression of a work is not to be trusted, rather that the way you reflect on your own experience with it needs vital room to breathe. Time, as distance, as a means of letting something sit and germinate in your mind, is how we determine where a work of art sits historically, personally, and what it means to the totality of a life lived, how important it is on a social level, and how vital it is to the individual engaging with it. What is the point of all this rumination from yours truly? UFO 50, a game I've already conceded has no right way to play, but a very definitive wrong way, inspired not by a formal critical appraisal of the game, but rather some of the more off-the-cuff reactions to it. Social media posts, first impressions on podcasts, honest opinions brought forth at what I consider to be maybe the wrong time in each person's relationship with the game. Folk writing off certain titles from the get-go due to bouncing off them initially. Folk saying that it's a collection with maybe 10 great games and a load of duffers. Folk with a clear idea of what they think retro games are and the nutritional value of these titles as perceived from a few brief glances. These are not people who are taking the game for granted. These are avid fans engaging with the work on their own terms, but it's been peculiar to see such a strange one strike and you're out approach to the first impressions of many of the titles on offer, especially considering how comparatively little input is required to germinate a much more nuanced response to these things. There will be firm favourites, I don't doubt, and definitely in my own experience with the game there are titles I find less enthralling than others. I'm not allowing myself to fall victim to sunk cost fallacy here. I know at some point I have to accept when a particular game just isn't for me. However, I am still determined to put that effort in, to understand what it actually is that I like or don't like about each entry in this collection. And already I see more often than not a growing appreciation for each one I play the more I play it. I'm no stranger to Mossmouth's body of work. I love the Spelunky games, even though I'm bad at them. And part of why I love them is that they've got a lot of intricacies within their worlds and rule sets that expose themselves the more intimately familiar you become with them. The more you grace their hallowed halls, the more you notice these seemingly inconsequential asides and realize their importance to the conversation you are having with the entire body of work. Already, I see this same beautiful complexity in UFO 50, even in that chronologically first title, Barbuta, which I'll admit I struggled with the first time I played it. That falling ceiling on the first screen is a total wanker move, I'm not going to argue that, but eventually I came to adore what was awaiting me once I figured out the rules of this particular world. I even physically drew a map in an attempt to make sense of its peculiarities. You're probably looking at it right now. Please be kind, I'm a writer, not a graphic designer. You don't go to these lengths for something with nothing to say, and you can't attach yourself to this kind of intrigue from 10 idle minutes of play. You need to dedicate time and mental energy in pursuit of this, and even if the end result is still, I don't like it, you benefit from the exercise nonetheless. Not every game in the collection is like Barbuta though. Some are content with tasking the player to master a solitary, contained gameplay loop. Ninpek, for example, is an experience that can technically be completed from start to finish in around 10 minutes. Magic Garden is just one screen with randomly placed elements on it. However, the rules still apply here too. These are ludolic entities that blossom the more effort you put in. From my own personal experience, I found that it took 2 or 3 separate sessions to really get to the heart of these games, and part of the reason why I'm banging this particular drum so hard is that I'm really worried that UFO 50 will fall afoul of the Game Pass effect. You know what it's like. There are more good games coming out every day than any of us have the capacity to engage with. When you have access to so many things all at once, and with the zeitgeist ever moving forward, it's hard not to feel the pressure to move on to the next thing in quick succession. There's always another game to play, there's always another conversation to have. So easy it is to slip into the mentality of, I don't have time for this, and move on with your life. I don't blame you. Your free time is precious. Hard decisions must be made regarding how you spend it. But if we talk about the nomenclature of content consumption as being fundamentally anti-art, then this is it at a primal level. It's for this very reason that I ended up cancelling my Game Pass subscription. I was playing loads of games, but I never felt like I was digesting them properly. Absorb and move on. It's that rushed meal again, an attempt to extract the maximum caloric intake from a work of art in the quickest time possible. One of the worst side effects of this is how quickly games get forgotten in the conversation. There is a risk with UFO 50 that the general consensus will think of it as little more than a cute gimmick, a minigame collection with little substance to most of its entries, a team with eyes bigger than stomachs that shot themselves in the foot with such lofty plans, inevitably resulting in diminishing returns, when even from a cursory glance from any start point to the collection, it's clear that the total experience of this game is so much more. This is not some fickle flight of fancy. There's a reason this game took so bloody long to come out. You think that one-screen wonder isn't the product of months of iteration to perfect the execution of an idea? You don't think that there's some wider story being told throughout these experiences that deserve at the very least a brief moment of pause and reflection? Obviously, I can't tell you how to play this game. You paid for it. I should mind my own business and play it my own way. I certainly don't expect you to enforce for yourself these unhinged rules that I myself am following for the sake of getting to the core of what UFO 50 really is. For a game that has no right way to play, the generosity its creators bestow on players to seek out and choose how and when they engage with the work is a direct anathema to the skill gates of their previous games. I've seen barely a fraction of Spelunky in 1 and 2. What would be so bad about doing the same here? The point of the collection is to engage with it the way you want, to service your own tastes and desires, to think about it at whatever level you wish, and to take away from it only the lessons you want to learn. However, I implore you to, at the very least, take a little extra time and allow a little extra distance as you play the titles in this collection. Give more attention to the ones you're less enthusiastic about. Take the lessons from the ones you absolutely adore and apply them on a universal stage. You don't necessarily know if you're missing out on your favourite game. I think this is a strategy that anyone can benefit from. Hey, thanks for watching. If you'd like more in-depth words about the individual games that make up UFO 50, I have a running diary on each title that I publish every Friday on my Substack. I'll stick a link in the video description. Enjoy!